But if you want to go back to any of the other office hours that we had, they're on our YouTube, and that's youtube.com/grassroots.org, and that is spelled out. I'll put that on Twitter, what the YouTube link is, in just a few minutes. But you can find them, and each question that you may ask is actually categorized in the description with a timestamp, so you can quickly find a question that is yours or something that might interest you, and be able to quickly digest any of our office hour webinars. And then last but not least, just to give you a structure into the office hours dialogue, we make this so that our audience members can be able to talk with us directly in person. So ask your questions in the questions pane. We'll unmute you. However, if you can't speak, like I'm seeing some people don't have a microphone that's working right now, just leave a comment saying no microphone or no mic in front of your question. Jason or I can read out the question for you, and then we'll answer it. And then lastly, if there's a follow-up question to something that we are currently discussing with a member, we will bump your question right to the top to keep a cohesive flow to the questions. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Jason, but first I'd love to hear what your resolution for the year is, Jason.
So I guess one of my resolutions is to help, being that we help nonprofits with fundraising campaigns and fundraising strategy all over the country. I think a lot of nonprofits are still missing the boat when it comes to targeting millennials. We've got these campaigns and these initiatives that we've run for the last 10 years. And that was great for the boomer generation that 10 years ago I was sending an envelope to with a solicitation letter, but they're kind of phasing out now, and millennials are the ones who are starting to kind of come into their own in the world philanthropy. And so one of my resolutions is just to help nonprofits optimize their fundraising efforts to target and effectively reach millennials.
Yeah, an absolutely similar type of thing, just wanting to help more for the both of us. So I love it. I shot up a link to our YouTube as well into the hashtag GR Office Hours if anybody's interested in that after this webinar. But I'm going to let you kick it off with your state of the nonprofit union.
Sure, great. Thanks so much. So hi everybody, my name is Jason Nicosia. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at CommitChange, and we're a nationwide nonprofit fundraising technology that really helps nonprofits to modernize and consolidate their web fundraising efforts. And I'll give you the shameless self-promotion spiel, I guess, at the end for a few minutes if anybody wants to stick around at the end. But today we're here, really to talk about, 2015 is here. We're almost to the end of January already, and I know January is historically kind of a ramping up month for fundraisers who are really trying to pull together their plans for the new year. But by now, you should be solidifying those plans and really ready to grab 2015 by the horns. If anybody wants to ask questions, I want to get through this content just really quickly so that we can jump right into questions and have some discussion. We'll actually unmute you if you have a question when that moment comes, and Ben can kind of take care of that. So also, if you want to get in touch with me on Twitter, I've already posted to the GR Office Hours hashtag. I'll make sure to post up my LinkedIn and Facebook contact information at the end here as well. But I do want to talk about just kind of the state of the nonprofit world in 2015, right? Where, for the average nonprofit, what is the landscape out there? What does it look like out there? And there's a couple of things that are just universal to all the nonprofits in the country that are they're being affected by things like the increasing wealth gap. So the richer or the rich are getting richer, and the not so rich are getting even less rich. So as you're building out your fundraising plans, those people who gave $10,000 or $20,000 or $50,000 donations last year, are probably even more capable of giving that same donation, if not more, this year. And then your other batch of people who maybe were participated in a crowdfunding campaign and donated $20 or $30, once or twice last year, they may be even less likely to have the capacity to donate. So that's something to think about, just for every nonprofit, is just the continuing growth of that wealth gap. The next thing that's kind of related to that is that private foundations are getting wealthier. So really, the ability to access grants, nonprofit foundations are getting more and more savvy about how to dole out grants and how to assign grants to nonprofits. And so not only is the application process becoming streamlined, but private foundations are also getting wealthier because they're funded by that upper end of the wealth demographic. So that's something to consider as well, is that private foundations are still a viable source for fundraising and getting grants for your nonprofit. The next thing is that we're continuing to see world challenges that directly affect our donors' ability to donate to our organizations. So there's great needs out there for the dollars that are spent on nonprofit fundraising. If we look at just this last year, the Ebola scare overseas, and even in the U.S., there was a huge response of people donating to this cause that, really had nothing to do with your nonprofit. However, people are donating to different organizations that they may not ordinarily support because of these world needs and because of the needs of our nation. And so, what does this mean to you as a nonprofit? Still remains to be seen. I think we still haven't really seen the effect of what this means to individual nonprofit organizations, that their donors are also participating in things like fundraising for the Ebola awareness or the Ice Bucket Challenge, right? It's something that, you probably have tons of donors who supported the Ice Bucket Challenge and are also donors for your organization. How does that impact you? Another thing that we're seeing is that government funding is continuing to decrease, which means that there's an increased demand for services from nonprofits. So people who would typically rely on the government for particular services are relying even more on nonprofits for those same services. And so we're seeing an increased demand for services from nonprofits, although capacity is still not necessarily increasing to supply that demand for nonprofits. Another thing that I think in 2014, Ben, we talked about crowdfunding as, a lot of people were still not sure if it was just a trend or if it was something that's really just here to stay. And I mean crowdfunding in two senses of the word, right? Number one, just individuals crowdfunding for specific needs. For example, my uncle goes to the hospital and I need to quickly raise money to support his hospital bill. That's crowdfunding. But I think we're talking about crowdfunding in the sense of a nonprofit rallying the power of their supporters and their network to rally around a particular story that's related to their nonprofit. And that method, that tactic of fundraising, is absolutely here to stay for 2015. The last thing, and this is kind of tying back into what one of my New Year's resolutions is about millennials expecting more. I always say that the 7 most deadly words that a nonprofit can use is that, but we've always done it that way, right? We've always done it that way. And I'm sure a lot of you know Amy Sample Ward. She says often that people need to innovate like they need to breathe, right? Innovation and change are crucial to staying relevant in the nonprofit world, and specifically when it comes to fundraising. And if I can just for a second get a little bit more granular here, and again, guys, feel free to start posting up those questions. Let's get the conversation percolating. I see we've got a couple here coming. Thanks, David, for submitting a couple of questions, and we'll get to those in just a minute here. I want to get really granular right away about what millennials do expect when it comes to fundraising. And so the first thing that they really has been a little bit lacking in the past is trust. With the recession, donors were less likely to trust the government, less likely to trust corporations, and with that, less likely to trust that nonprofits that they were using those donations in the right way. And so really being transparent about that fundraising as part of your strategy, using transparency as part of your strategy is really crucial. And transparency can really be broken down into 3 pieces. I think transparency with the money, right? How much money has been given to your organization in regards to purpose. So what did you do with that money? What did you do with the money that actually came in? And then impact. What did that money that came in? What did it actually accomplish? What were the tangible and measurable results of that money that came in? So really, being transparent about what you're doing with your fundraising and how much you're raising and what it's impacting is really critical for millennials to understand and appreciate what is going on within the organization. Another thing, I constantly harp on this to all of our clients at CommitChange. We've got over I think 300 or 400 nonprofits using CommitChange at least on a daily basis, and last year over 10,000 donors used CommitChange to donate to their favorite nonprofit. One thing I constantly see is that donors are expecting a seamless user experience, and what I mean by user experience is, and I'm going to pick on a few nonprofits right now. What I mean by the user experience is not a donation form that looks like a PayPal, right? Not a donate form that links out to a third-party application with no branding. What I mean is not a donation form that will time out after just a few seconds, and again linking out to a third-party application that I have 6 or 7 steps that are all required to complete. What I mean by user experience is when I go to a nonprofit's website, I can quickly and easily, see the donate form on that nonprofit's website and fill it out in just a few seconds. So if I click on this nonprofit St. Bernard project here, I can literally complete a donation in just a few seconds. That's what we're talking about when these donors are having higher expectations of a seamless integration and a viable and a positive donor experience. And we talk about that donor experience a lot. Ben, I know you and I have discussed it quite a bit in the past. What we mean there is that when I go to purchase a pair of golf shoes on eBay, I'm motivated by getting something in return, right? I'm willing to tolerate this PayPal checkout process because at the end of the day, I'm getting some golf shoes in the mail. So I'm willing to go through the 6 or 7 steps that are required for me, and I am willing to be linked out to this third-party application that has nothing to do with eBay in order to complete my payment. Now, when it comes to a donation for a nonprofit, I'm absolutely not willing to tolerate that transaction process. If I can't complete it in just a few seconds, I'm not going to go through the process. And so, one statistic that I want to point out about capturing donors and then also keeping donors, right? When we're talking about donor retention, right? We all have our list of nonprofits, or excuse me, our list of donors who supported us last year, who were involved with our fundraising efforts last year. Well, the likelihood that those donors are going to continue to give to your organization, that you're going to be able to have them be repeat donors, is over 60%, right? And new donor retention is at less than 22%. So when I think of, in my fundraising efforts, is it easier to capture a new donor or to just keep a previous donor and continue to keep them engaged and cultivate that relationship? It's so much easier to do that, and it creates a much stronger likelihood that that same donor is going to continue to support your organization time and time again. And so, how are a few ways that you can cultivate those relationships? Again, one is using that MPI strategy, money, purpose, impact, is showing your donors what the impact of their donations is having, what are you doing with the money that they're giving, and then how much you're actually raising, and how much they will actually have supported your organization, what their impact was on your organization. And so, talking about donor retention, one very simple way that you can immediately cultivate a relationship with a donor is through the thank you note that you send as soon as they complete this form right here, right? As soon as they actually go and donate to your organization, how are you actually sending them a thank you note, and then what are you doing with their contact info once they give to your organization? Are you just dropping them into your monthly email newsletter list? Are you sending them a customized thank you note with a link to find out more about your organization? And I want to use an example here. I actually one of our customers actually links to a thank you video every time their donors contribute. So imagine that there's this personalized thank you note from the people that you're actually impacting with your nonprofit every time you send out a thank you note to that donation. So they get that immediate explanation of, and visual even of, how this donation that I just gave is supporting that actual cause. And so the thank you note is a great way to immediately engage a donor and cultivate that continuing relationship. But then, all donors are not equal, right? All donors are not the same. And so if I'm sending one generic newsletter to all of those donors, again, that's going to have a less than positive impact on your ability to continue to retain and maintain relationships with those donors and really cultivate that donor to where, if they gave $3 to a crowdfunding campaign earlier this year and I've had all of this communication with them, do I really want to only ask them for $3 the next time that I give? No, certainly, once I learn a little bit more about them, once I interface with them, maybe even communicate directly with them, I might find out that it was their kid that had the credit card, and they actually are much more interested in being involved in the organization in a big way. And so I think, thinking about the way that donors and millennials especially, want to interface with nonprofit organizations in 2015, it's just a continuation of the trends of 2014, right? The days of being able to link out to third-party applications right from your website, the days of being able to, have your entire annual fundraiser based on one dinner or relying on one particular grant that has been there for 20 years, those days are over. There's certainly, even within the nonprofit world, increased competition. You see nonprofits like Pencils of Promise and CharityWater that really have come and caused a great disruption in those types of industries that they're supporting, those types of causes that they're supporting, because they're just so effective at their brand, at building out their brand, and they're so effective at fundraising. So, Ben, I don't know if you, I know you had a couple of questions that people might have submitted already. If we want to jump right into those, I want to reserve the majority of this time, our discussion here, to answer your questions and just kind of get some discussion percolating around, kind of what the state of fundraising is for 2015. What do you guys think millennials are expecting, and how are you really reaching out to that demographic and capturing it? And then also, I'd love to hear some ideas that you guys have, or maybe some troubleshooting on, how do you continue to maintain that transparency? How do you continue to build that trust and show donors that their gift is an investment in your organization? So really, how are you able to tie their money directly back to the impact that it's having? So with that, Ben, you want to I guess fire off the first question. I'll pull up the questions section as well. And Ben, I think you'll have to unmute people as we go along here. But it looks like we've got some great questions percolating already. I'll give just a quick little overview. Of course, I wouldn't be a good chief marketing officer without telling you just a little bit about CommitChange at the end of our talk here. But let's go ahead and jump right into those questions, Ben.
Well, so the first one might come from David Gutierrez, but he doesn't have a microphone, so we can ask his directly from myself, and then you can answer it. But he asks about recruiting more volunteer pilots.
More volunteer what?
Pilots.
Oh, pilots. Okay.
Oh, I think it's because he's muted.
Okay, gotcha.
Can you hear us, David?
Yeah, I can hear you.
There you go.
Oh, hey, David.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, listen,
doing great.
This question probably isn't as relevant to this discussion, but marketing is marketing, isn't it? And my organization is basically flying our veterans that need care remote from their locations to institutions of healthcare that's remote from where they live, and doing so free of charge, much like the angel flight organizations and things like that. And we're in our infancy, and I'd like to get more pilots on board, and I was wondering if you had any insight on how I could go about doing that.
Well, talking about volunteers, right? A lot of the best practices used for both engaging new donors and really marketing your nonprofit to your community are the same tactics that you'll use in recruiting volunteers, right? I think a lot of times people focus so much on the donor aspect, but volunteers can be even harder to both recruit and then retain than an actual donor can, right? Because people are much more jealous with their time than they are with their money. And so I think, when you're looking at, how do I go and recruit additional volunteers for my organization? How do I make more people aware? I think a great way to begin to cultivate that list is just ask your strongest supporters for referrals. To really, there's a core group that you've got relationships with, specifically, if you're thinking even just at a most basic level, your board members. Talk to those board members about, what contacts can they reach so that you can go out and owners. I guess it's for you guys, it's probably a little bit harder to find actual pilots as well. There's, I'm sure, a limited supply of pilots out there versus, if you're a Habitat for Humanity organization, you're looking for anybody who can hold a hammer. So I'm sure that has its own challenges in and of itself. But I also think, talking about and highlighting the volunteer opportunities on your website, and of course in different forums where those types of volunteers might be hanging out, in different blogs and different discussion groups where those types of volunteers might already be hanging out. Just joining and participating in conversations there, oftentimes you'll find that there are people who are interested in being involved. And I think this is something that's important to understand when you're talking about recruiting donors or recruiting volunteers. They're not all just hanging out on Facebook, and they're not automatically just going to find your page because because they wanted to. It's about finding relevant groups and relevant communities to engage with that are much more likely to be involved in the type of organization that you're building. So if you're saying that you're trying to find volunteer pilots, find some online forums or blogs that are talking about piloting, that you have that community that's already created, and then start commenting and sharing your story and communicating with that group. You'll be much more likely to engage people than you will if you're just kind of using the spray and pray approach of sending out a blanket email blast and assuming that there might be one pilot in the group.
Okay.
And I actually have some information from another participant, Andrew Waffler, who says that there is an airman database available on the FAA website, and you're able to sort them by address.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I knew about the database, but mostly by tail number. I didn't know there was one listed by airmen, piloted airmen.
And
but that's a good. I'll pursue that.
Perfect. Yeah, and maybe you can Andrew can post to the GR office hours or to you directly on Twitter some means and be able to share some more information.
Yeah, if anybody else has ideas for David as well about reaching new volunteers and pilots, certainly post up using that hashtag, and we'll make sure to get him the information.
Yeah, I mean, certainly one of the biggest things we want to do with the Twitter campaign, the hashtag, is to be able to have a conversation not just between Jason and myself to you, but between participants as well.
Can I ask just one last question?
Absolutely.
With regards to your donation portal, right now, unfortunately, I do exactly have what your taboo, which is a PayPal link. Are there who are the merchant account, the merchant account people that will have that you know of that are like have maybe something that for these nonprofits is not so costly that I can integrate into my web page? Because all this is, I'm working on a shoestring budget right now, and I'm also donating a lot of my time, my airplane wear and tear, and my gas and all that stuff. But it seems hard to get other people to be as passionate about my stuff than I am.
Of course, I'm a little biased, right, when it comes to what you should use for your donation processing. I will say, you can certainly create a free account through CommitChange and use some of our free tools. That will certainly, at the very least, be better than linking them out to PayPal. But the one thing I'll say in your search for a tool, if specifically in regards to donation processing, is that make sure whatever tool that you're looking at is something that integrates directly with your website and doesn't link out to a third-party application. And what I mean by that is make sure that the URL, the web address at the top doesn't change. So if you notice here for this, again, I'm just going to pick on this Boys and Girls Club here for a second. They're actually a client now, but I used their old screen. Notice that even though this is branded to the Boys and Girls Club, the URL is different. It links out to a third-party application. Only about between 50 and 70% of donors are going to continue if they see that you're linking out to a third-party application. So you're easily losing almost half of your donors when you link out to a third-party application like that, just because your average donor doesn't necessarily trust that third-party application. They don't understand that it's something that you've actually selected and that it's part of your organization. They see it as it's linking out to a third-party website. It could be spam or something like that.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, David.
David, before we let you go, is there? I'm getting some more answers in the question pane about pilots. Shelley Lohr recommends trying to connect with Doctors Without Borders, and Reed is asking if you have any contact information. He has some more help about pilots. Do you have something that you'd like to share either via Twitter or your email address?
Can I just post my? Yeah, my email address would be D. Well, let me type it up on the. Will it come up on their thing? Let me type it up for you, and then you can.
If you put it onto the questions, I'll put it out. In a little bit.
Okay, I'll type that up. I'll also put my cell phone if anybody wants to call me.
Sounds good. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question now, and I'll get out David's information for those people who want it. The next one is coming from Orly O'Brien, and give me 1 second while I find her. Orly, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. So you're speaking with us now.
Wonderful.
Hey, Orly.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I'm wondering, we run a nonprofit museum, but our biggest problem is that we are in a very rural community of less than 200 people, full of aging donors and volunteers, no corporations around to get fundraising from. And as you said, I'm up in Canada, and our governments are really closing down on grants available and changing things up when it comes to public money. What kind of ideas can you give me in our situation to help revitalize our fundraising?
Well, I think if your constituents reach is only around 200 people because of the size of your community and just the reach of your organization locally, I think one thing that could be really effective for you guys, especially because you're a museum and there's probably all kinds of really unique stories around different aspects of the museum, crowdfunding might be something that could be effective in raising a few dollars, but also expanding that database. So one thing that's great about crowdfunding, and I think Ben, you and I might have talked about this for the Ice Bucket Challenge, right? Was that lots of people only donated $5 for the Ice Bucket Challenge, but then those people went right into the ALSA donor database so that they could be communicated with and have that relationship built and cultivated time and time again. So Orly, I think one thing that might be effective for you guys is to think about a particular story that might be really relevant to the nonprofit, and then push that story out via social media, and ask some other museums to help you get the word out. Ask some other groups to help you get the word out, to where you're not just reaching your local constituent base that are already supporters of the museum, but if you're doing it around a particular story. So let's just say, for example, that we were talking about pilots earlier. So let's say you were an airport museum, right? And there was a particular World War II plane that you guys have at the museum, and it's just got a really amazing story around. Well, what you should be targeting, right, is not people who support museums. You should be targeting people who are going to support that particular story. And so, reaching out to groups that might really think that this is an important artifact to preserve, or an important story that needs to be heard. Crowdfunding campaign can be a great way to build out on that, rather than just sending out paper mailers or a link on your website where people can donate, because there you're really only accessing the people that you currently have access to.
Awesome, thank you. That's something I hadn't thought of, and I like the idea of picking a story. I did comment, you had said you'd like to know what people do to thank their donors, and one thing that we do is we always send out a personalized thank you card to our donors, and it always has a picture of our museum right on the cover.
Yeah.
And we always send out a biannual newsletter which details what we've done over the past 6 months, what we've put our money into, and what our plans are and our hopes for the future.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, keeping your supporters informed and making them feel like they're really part of things is really critical. And that's great to hear that you actually send out a personalized thank you too. Whether it's a $5 donation or a $5,000 donation, there's no substitute ever for a handwritten card. So
I agree wholeheartedly. Makes a big difference to people.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And one thing too to think about, again, I tend to be super biased towards the internet things. Is that you can if a card is that great, right? If your donors if you've got their email info, you can even make a little thank you video. The production value is not important. The lighting and the background is not important. Just take your iPhone, record a 1-minute little thank you note, post it up to YouTube, and then send it as a link in your donor thank you emails. And that's something that you can scale as well, right? You can record 5 different videos, one saying thank you for your $10 donation, one saying thank you for your $500 donation, etc. It's something, it would take you all of 20 minutes to record a couple of videos and post them up to YouTube. And then, you think a personal handwritten note is something that, is really personal. What about an actual video where they're actually seeing your face thanking them for that donation? So again, just something else to consider. But it sounds, Laura, like you guys are on the right track as far as keeping your donors informed.
Great ideas. Thank you so much.
I just want to quickly ask if, Reed, you were able to see the email address that I shared from David Gutierrez. If so, let me know. But we'll go on to the next person, and this is Gary Schlitz. Let me just find him quickly. Gary, can you hear us? Jason, are you able to hear me right now?
Yeah, I can hear you. You may have to go ahead and just read out his question there, though.
Okay, perfect. So Gary's asking a question about utilizing a CRM, something out of the box, commercial versus open source, with respect to integration with other software, probably best practices for an organization.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of great tools out there to manage your donor data, and data really, when it comes to cultivating those relationships and being sure that you're communicating effectively with donors, your data is the most critical piece, and consolidating that data can often be a real pain, as I'm sure a lot of you can attest. I see product suites all the time where a nonprofit is using PayPal to accept donations, then they're using Eventbrite to run their events, and then they're using Indiegogo for their crowdfunding campaigns, and then they're putting it all into Donor Perfect on the back end, and none of those tools talk to each other. And so it can be, and then of course there's the email newsletter piece, whether you're using MailChimp or Constant Contact on top of that. So, being able to consolidate that data, I think is really important. And so when you're looking into different CRMs, Gary, looks like he mentions Nation Builder here, which I think is also a really great tool if you've got the budget for it. One thing to be aware of is make sure that the tools that you're looking into integrate with the other tools that you either currently use or want to use. So, definitely integrations and open source tools, I think, are going to be only more and more efficient. And tools that you have to download or upload onto your desktop and that aren't web-based you're going to see very quickly over the next 3 to 5 years go by the wayside. So something that is open source, built on a platform, on a web-based platform, is what you're going to want to look into if you don't already have a CRM set up. And when we're talking about CRM, we're really talking about something that you're using as a donor management database, where you're actually able to track information about your donor history. You're able to actually communicate directly with donors. So when you're talking about your fundraising tools versus your actual back-end dashboard. There's definitely two different aspects there.
Great. And before we move on, I'm
going to pull up the back end of commit. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, you can go ahead. I just letting know to Andrew. I know he had posted to the survey or the forum prior that this recording is being this webinar is being recorded. So if anybody does have to leave midway through it, we'll be sending that out as well. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, no, I was just going to, as a final note to Gary here, making sure that, when the most critical thing that you need to make sure about a CRM, and kind of one of the biggest pitfalls that you can run across in nonprofit fundraising, is that you're over-soliciting a donor. And what I mean by that is, let's say they participated in 2 different campaigns and have donated twice. Well, what you want to make sure to absolutely avoid is that same donor is getting 2 separate solicitations, back to back for different campaigns when they're only meant to be getting one. And so making sure that there's only one record of a donor. So this is just some dummy data I have here for an organization over in Washington State. If Lisa here had multiple records and was getting multiple, if she had all of these different times that she had donated, and we had 4 different email addresses for her in the system, and if she was going to get 4 separate emails for 4 separate campaigns, that could really cause some problems as far as cultivating that relationship with Lisa. So you really want to make sure that you're consolidating that donor data as you're building out your CRM and your donor management processes.
Can you quickly again explain what a CRM is?
Yeah, sure. CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management, and in the donor management world and the fundraising world, a lot of times we just call them donor management platforms or donor database tools. Really, the front-end fundraising tools are what you use to actually accept money. So that's your donation button on your website, your campaigns where people can give, if you're selling tickets for events, or you have an online store where people are purchasing services. You need to make sure that you're tracking all of this right on the back end so that you know when it's appropriate to reach out to a donor, so you know when and how to send follow-up communications and thank you notes, and also just how to track your overall fundraising efforts, right, to see how much you're raising overall, what your nonprofit's cash flow is month to month. A nonprofit is still a business, and without money, that business can't exist. And so, it's really important to, at any given time, be able to see a snapshot of, where you are with your fundraising and see what the trends are over time of your donors' participation. So CRM, when we talk about CRM, we're really talking about your donor management database and the tools you use to actually manage communications and relationships and information about your donors. These are typically back-end tools that the donors don't see.
And the
what we got next, Ben?
Question is coming from Gabrielle. Gabby, can you hear us?
Hello?
Hi, Gabby.
Hi, hello. And
hey, how
yes,
you doing?
Good, thank you. Yes, my question is in regards, you can give us some examples of the, how the interaction and the response should be based on different giving amounts, like perhaps if a donor is giving 50 versus 1,000, or some different examples of how the interaction should be and the response, how it should be.
Sure. So I think part of what you're asking too is, should a donor be placed in a particular bucket based on the donation that they're giving? Is that right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a nonprofit over in California that I met with a few weeks ago, and they have a really great system. They actually literally go and check out each donor on LinkedIn as they come in, and to see if they have a LinkedIn profile and what their profession is, and they basically try to create a profile to gauge how likely that person is and what capacity they have to actually give either the same amount or a higher or lower amount in the future. And so I think when you're, certainly anybody that gives more than $500 to an organization in any given donation, they need to be getting a personal phone call from somebody at your organization, both thanking them for that donation and also cultivating that relationship. Because somebody who's going to donate $500, even in a one-time gift, is very likely that they have the capacity to either donate again or to donate higher amounts in the future. So when you're asking about what kind of interaction or response should a $50 versus $500 donor give, the relationships are, I mean, I would say that the relationships are both equally important, but certainly, you know, because the $50 donor may want to give $50 a month for the next 12 months, in which case it would be higher than $500. So I think, you know, there's an appropriate response to each donor, but certainly any donor should be getting some degree of real interaction, real response from your organization. Now, what level of response? I guess that really depends on the type of nonprofit and really how in depth you want to be in regards to communicating with your donors. I mean, if you're a nonprofit that, you know, your annual budget is $200,000, well, even a $50 donation might, you know, elicit a call from you guys to build that relationship and find out, you know, how else you might be able to engage that donor. A great thing to do too is, you know, donors are about 80% as likely as a general newsletter recipient of your nonprofit to be volunteers as well. So, you know, if you're looking for a great place to start recruiting volunteers for your organization, your donor database is a great place to start with that. So when, you know, going back to your original question, you know, are there appropriate types of or amounts of interactions or responses based on different giving amounts? The only, I guess, real caution that I would give is sometimes donors and supporters who give larger dollar amounts can be a little bit sensitive to continued outreach from an organization. So, you know, if you have a major gift that comes in and it's a $10,000 gift, you know, in 6 months, do you really want to be asking that donor for another $10,000? I mean, that's a very precarious ask, right, if you're not absolutely sure that you're going to have positive results from it. So I think, you know, again, cultivating a relationship with the donors and understanding, you know, what level of communication and solicitation is appropriate is really key.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, the next question comes from Charles Brice. 1 second. Charles, can you hear us?
Hello, Charles.
Hello.
Hey, Charles.
Oh, hi.
Hey, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, thanks. Thanks for taking my call. You mentioned earlier that private foundations are getting wealthier and that they're becoming much more sophisticated in terms of applications, in terms of streamlining the applications. For a small nonprofit, what's the most effective way of being able to get funding or find foundations that will support the causes that mission of your particular nonprofit?
You know, Ben may actually be a better person to answer this question than I would, but I do know that there are sites out there that have lists of foundations and the types of nonprofits that they support and the types of grants that they have available. I'm sure there's at least a few people on this call here that have had experience with those types of sites, and I could probably also ask a few of our clients what some of those sites are, because I know, you know, many of our clients have a large portion of their funding coming from donations, but they also rely heavily on getting grants, and there definitely are resources out there that are similar to grassroots, if not grassroots, for finding foundations that are, you know, likely to align with your nonprofit's mission. But Ben, do you want to maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
So, I mean, first I got to preface that I'm not a grant writer. I wish I had the former executive director who was a grant writer for us, but I know some of the methods that he had utilized to search for grants, and he would sign up for, and Jason was talking about some of those sites that are out there. There's the Foundation Center, and these all have some type of price tag to them, but you can go to, and there's a list, and I'll post it onto the Twitter with local libraries will have the database of the Foundation Center. There's also Grant Station, and there's Philanthropic. And the biggest thing for some of these in searching through these foundations to see if they're going to be right for your organization. And I can't get too in-depth for you. don't want to leave anybody misinformed, but is to rely on both finding organizations, and all these tools will have it, who are akin to your organization that they've funded, and then trying to build relationships. I know Philantrack, a tool that Grassroots is partnered with, and you'll find that in our in what's titled our store once you log in. And again, I can help you with any information that you need in that, is that Philantrack will provide, if you have any type of relationship to a program officer from that foundation. So it actually utilizes LinkedIn's Circles feature to see if you have somebody who is related to another. And again, it's building those relationships that's paramount in cultivating donors, as well as in cultivating relationships with different foundations. But I like Jason's idea of if anybody has any other help, post in the hashtag GR office hours. I'd love to get you some more advice on this, Charles. Okay,
great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
That's one thing that's so cool about Grassroots, is that it really is a community. So while we'll get some things taken care of on the actual webinar here, there really is a community of support that you have available to you, at just about any time. So if you ever have any questions, if you submit them to Grassroots, if Grassroots doesn't have the answer right off the bat, they certainly have a nonprofit in their database of over 8,000 or 9,000 nonprofits that will have the answer for you.
Certainly. And then moving on, Casey Thomas asks, and I'm just going to say this, sharing example links that you had pointed out earlier for reference on this chat window. Jason, do you know if your chat has been going out to people, and if not, can we also post those to the chat and the Twitter handle so people can utilize them? You don't have to obviously do that now, but as we go along.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. I'll try to continue posting to the chat here. It looks like I'm able to reach the entire audience.
Perfect. All right. The next question is coming from Jessica. Let me find her. Here we are. Jessica, can you hear us? It's Jessica McLear. I don't know if I pronounced the last name correctly. Jessica might not be able to, she might not have a microphone, so I'll read out the question for you, Jason.
That's okay. Sorry about that, Jessica. We'll get you covered here as best we can.
So she says, my nonprofit Fund for a Better Waterfront in Hoboken, New Jersey is interested in crowdsourcing to fund redevelopment plans. I want to know where are the most essential elements that are effective to generate interest and secure donations, i.e. how much content, what kind of media to provide.
Yeah, well, without knowing anything about the organization, that might be a little bit tough. Yeah, I mean, a great resource to help to create content and gain awareness for your nonprofit is blogging. If you've got some industry knowledge on the cause that your nonprofit is supporting. Again, this question might be a little bit tough to answer without actually knowing a little bit more about the organization.
There's a follow-up from Jessica. Let's see if you might have a better answer for that one. But certainly, reach out to Jason on Twitter or LinkedIn. You're a fiend for consuming social, Jason. So that's a wonderful way to get into touch with Jason. But the follow-up, is there a formula for cultivating new high-profile corporations?
Corporations are in the same situation, I think, oftentimes as the private foundations. That this is stocks are at an all-time high. A lot of large corporations are doing really well right now. But one thing that they're also experiencing is a huge increase in the volume of asks that they're getting from nonprofits. And so I think, you know, finding a corporation whose corporate mission and whose corporate message aligns with your organization, you're probably a lot more likely to get some headway there. So finding an organization that, you know, maybe they have a special division that is involved with philanthropy or involved with something that's relevant to your nonprofit, you know, trying to really get in with an individual there that can relate to your cause, or maybe even finding a supporter of your nonprofit that's involved in one of those organizations would probably be the best way to try to gain headway there in the corporate world. Again, you know, at CommitChange, we really focus on the, you know, one thing, you know, I always am telling our clients is, you know, you can't be relying on a grant that might not be there next year, or a corporate sponsorship that might, you know, be available one year and might not be available the following year. So, you know, individual donations, while, you know, most of the time they can't fully fund a nonprofit, are really the one thing that you can have direct control over. A grant that you get one year may go to somebody else the next year, and a sponsorship that you're able to get from a corporation, you know, may be available one year and not available the next year. So it's just something, you know, when you're thinking about diversifying your fundraising efforts, you know, that's just something to keep in mind, is that, you know, some of those things aren't always available.
So I believe, and I apologize if I don't get to your question, you know, quickly. There's a list here, but I see David Gutierrez has some insight, probably on the grant side, but I'm going to unmute him. David, can you hear us?
Yeah, when the gentleman asked about and foundations with grants and stuff like that, I've had some minor experience with this, and what I found that they like the most is that when you go to apply for their grant, it's not just a little page that here, fill in a bunch of fields and then they'll consider you. You know, they basically have you write a proposal, and it doesn't have to be written by like somebody writing a grant for some NIH funding grant. It's basically they just want to hear your story, why you're asking for funds, and how their funds, the funds you're asking for, somehow furthers the foundation's goals, and how your organization is helping to further their goals. And so you got to translate that for them. And they also had a list of instructions, and you have to follow them to the T. If you sit there and try to elaborate out, or they say, give us a 2-page proposal, and you write them a 2.5-page proposal, it's going to go into the circular file. They get thousands of proposals, and they have a whole section of people that just filter out people that don't follow instructions. And so basically just follow their instructions, their bulleted instructions, exactly as they did it, because that speeds their process up of being able to sift through all the proposals they're getting. And if you're capable of following those simple instructions, you go on to the next pile of ones they got to review. Otherwise, they'll just put you right into the circular file.
Yeah, got to be definitely a stickler for their things. They do want to weed out people quickly. Appreciate it.
They will for the knowledge, yeah.
Yeah.
But they will, you know, they want to give these. That's their purpose. But they get so many that they use any little not following of the instructions as an excuse to say, well, maybe this is probably somebody we don't want to deal with. If they can't follow these simple instructions, why do we want to send them their money? And they'll tell you item by item what they're looking for. So it's not like there's any guesswork involved. It's pretty straightforward. If you can follow those instructions, then it's just a matter of how your organization furthers their organization. And if you can put that in writing in those 2 pages or whatever they're asking for, you have a good chance of getting a grant from them, I think. And that's all I had to say.
I appreciate it, David. We appreciate people filling in the gaps where Jason and myself don't, you know, necessarily have a wealth of knowledge. So that is appreciated, David. We're moving on to Shelley Lohr. Let me find Shelley. Shelley, can you hear us? Might be that Shelley does not have a microphone, but Shelley has a whole slew of questions, and I'll read them out one by one for you, and we can go through them.
Sure.
Well, Shelley had some advice for and I apologize, I've been erasing questions as we've gone along to keep them organized, but to the individual who had a museum, I know Shelley has been very active on Twitter, so especially the hashtag GR office hours, so go to it. She's already provided a lot of great insight, but Shelley asks, one of her first questions is, how often should you go to a donor without being exhausting or overboard?
Yeah, I think that that's a good question. I don't think there's any right answer to it. I certainly think that not more than once a month, except there's one exception to the amount that you should reach out to a donor, and that one exception is the holidays, right? End-of-year giving and holiday giving, as most of you guys probably already know, about 33% of all online donations are going to happen over the holidays. So that means, and that's specifically in the month of December. So that means that a third of all the donations that you're going to get over the web are going to happen in the month of December. And the stats, I'm not exactly sure what they are, but I think they're pretty similar for your mailer solicitations as well. So when you're thinking about how often is too often to reach out to a donor and talk to a donor, that really just depends on what other kind of communication you have going out. I think a great rule of thumb, though, is on any communication, even if it's not a hard ask, even if it's like one of those newsletter updates, that you make sure that there's a call to action at the bottom of that email with a donate button that links directly to your donate page on your website. So even if you're not going to solicit, and at the very least, you should have a newsletter going out to your constituents every month, right? At the very least of communication, once a month, email newsletter is the absolute minimum that you should be reaching out. But and on that same token, every one of those email newsletters, even if they're not a direct solicitation saying, hey, by the way, if you can help with our capital campaign, here's the link. Even if you're not, actually making a direct ask, having a link to the donate button at the very bottom of the page with just a quick little thing that says, your donations keep us in business. Here's the link if you can support us. That certainly is much different than a hard ask. We've talked a little bit about a hard ask versus a soft ask. A hard ask being where the subject of the email is, we need your help, and the soft ask being, here's an email newsletter about our impact, and by the way, the last sentence is, hey, and if you want to donate, here's the link. So I think, mixing up those types of communications to where you're not just, every email is an actual solicitation is important.
And before I go on to her second question, we've got a great response, I must say, so far, and we'll get to everybody who's currently attending first, and then people who haven't attended, we'll get to their questions towards the end, just because we've hit the 1 hour mark, which is wonderful. It's been great so far, but we certainly want to get to everybody's questions before we wrap up. So if there are any other questions that people do want to ask prior to us wrapping up, do submit them into the questions pane. But now going into Shelley's second question, how do you feel about etapestry fundraising, Jason?
So etapestry is one of the companies that's owned by Blackbaud. Blackbaud is the only publicly traded nonprofit technology company out there, and I think they're a $1.6 billion annual revenue company. So they're really the 800-pound gorilla in the industry. Direct experience with etapestry in a fundraising capacity. It was a long time ago before they had really made many changes to the platform. I also, CommitChange is probably almost a direct competitor with etapestry. We're trying to approach things from a little more modern, a little bit different standpoint. But I do know that there is one place where etapestry shines, and that is there are tons and tons of features. I think for a lot of nonprofits it can be feature overload. But I know that, if there's a feature that your nonprofit needs, etapestry, probably has it. Is it incredibly expensive? Yes. Do you get tied into multi-year contracts that you don't necessarily want to? Yes. Do you have to pay every time you want to do an integration or call support or make changes to your account or export data, yes. But is it probably the most comprehensive tool out there? It's at least one of the top 2 or 3. CommitChange, we're really approaching things from a simplicity standpoint and really trying to simplify that donor communication process and fundraising process. So it's a little bit different than the approach that etapestry takes. But positive or negative, views on etapestry, I wouldn't really want to say one or the other.
The next question comes from Gary Schlitz. Gary, we are unmuting people. If you have a microphone, love to hear from you. Gary had previously asked about the CRM commercial application versus open source. Can you hear us, Gary?
Yes, I can hear you. Now I don't seem to be muted anymore. Great.
Hey, Gary.
Yeah, on my last question, I seem to stay muted. So this time, I did want to ask, I was asked if I can follow up on my previous question there. I was asking about the CRM and whether it's best to try to roll your own, perhaps. And if I were to roll my own, because I am a retired software engineer, do you have any suggestions for free or lower-priced virtual private servers providers?
I know lower-priced Heroku is a great hosting service, and it's really easy to integrate into. So it's heroku.com. Certainly easier to spin up than like an Amazon EC2 server or something like that for hosting. In regards to like,
do you have any of them give good prices for nonprofits or special deals that you've run across? Or
I really don't. I mean, most of the nonprofits that we work with, I mean, they're really just hosting a website, and then their other tools are hosted from a third-party application. So we see a lot of nonprofits that use WordPress or GoDaddy or even things like Squarespace or Wix are becoming increasingly popular just because they're easy to set up.
Okay.
But as far as
you see people then putting not hosting their own CRM then, not CRM, their CRM systems.
Yeah, I think their CRM. I think the CRM systems are increasingly going to the cloud, right? If it's a hosted solution, they're having to literally download new software every time they want to update the platform, and then your data, your information is hosted on your desktop versus being hosted in the cloud. So I think there's definite pros to having cloud-based CRM solution and fundraising solution. But as far as hosting, I mean, Heroku would be the first place that I would point you. Other than that, maybe I'd let you talk to our CTO, and he might have some better suggestions.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah, Gary, shoot me an email. Actually, I'll be happy to make that intro.
Sure. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. The next question comes from Reed Lester. I'm going to unmute him. Can't recall if Reed had a microphone or not. But Reed, can you hear us?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, Reed. Hey, before you ask your question, Reed, Chris Lopez mentioned for Gary, Bluehost is another place to look. So Gary, check out Bluehost as a possible hosting solution. And I was
going to mention that, but Chris would have been a much better. Chris Lopez is a new employee to Grassroots, and she knows a lot more about hosting than I do. But go ahead, Reed.
I was wondering about paying a fundraiser up front versus paying them a percentage of what they earn or what they raise.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and that's really so. I'm always wary of paying a fundraiser a percentage of what they raise. In fact, if you look at, I'll pull up this screen real quick on the CommitChange business model, but. What my concern with online fundraising when you're talking about paying a percentage of your fundraising efforts versus paying upfront, a standard fee is, when you're not sure if you're going to raise $1,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 or whatever the amount is, right? Oftentimes, paying somebody a percentage of the funds raised just doesn't scale up very well. And it can often lead to you know, the nonprofit being on, you know, if it's a very successful campaign, let's say that you say you're going to give the fundraiser 10% of all funds raised, right? And I assume you're talking about an individual fundraiser, not an actual software tool.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, it can really lead to some not so great results if you have an incredibly successful fundraising campaign. Let's say you raise, you know, $500,000 and you have to give up 10% of that versus, you know, for something that maybe is going to take them, you know, all of 2 weeks to put together, versus, you know, if there's an agreed upon amount prior. Of course, the risk in the pre-agreed amount being that you don't hit your goals, yet you're still owing the money to the fundraiser.
Okay, thank you.
I think one thing that we're going to continue to see too, and I didn't really talk about this as a trend, but you know, there's lots of great tools out there for nonprofits to use themselves. And so, you know, before, I mean, certainly fundraising consultants can be, you know, and again, you know, I come from that background, so I don't want to shoot myself in the foot. But you know, there's lots of great tools out there where, you know, you might be able to create an effective campaign and an effective, you know, fundraiser on your own without needing, you know, to actually engage a professional fundraiser to assist. So, you know, check out some of the tools out there. I mean, there's some really great tools and resources for you to build out your own campaigns and raise your own funds. But certainly, you know, there are situations where the expertise of a fundraiser is going to, you know, result in, you know, 10x the results of what, you know, you can sometimes do. So I think again, it's a case-by-case basis. But one thing I would just be very cautious of that, you know, percentage fee for fundraising, specifically if you think it has the potential to you know, raise a good bit of money.
The next question comes from Andrew Loeffler. I'm going to unmute him now. Andrew, are you able to hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, quick question there is I've met several people who have board of directors that pretty much are kind of their active fundraisers, and kind of curious if you've had experience with creating a board of directors that really focuses on fundraising as their primary goal and how to go about that and promote that.
I think if you have a fundraiser, if you have a board member who's not actively involved in the fundraising process, get a new board member. That's the whole point. The whole point of a nonprofit, you know, or I shouldn't say the whole point, but a key value add of a board member should be to help you fundraise. And so, you know, getting board members who are going to be active in that process, and even if they're not literally going out there and making calls, you know, are at least active in, you know, supporting the fundraising efforts to some capacity. You know, it's crucial for them to be a part of that. But I think, you know, beforehand, you know, gauging the interest level of a board member and how, you know, what their time commitment can be. You know, a lot of times you'll see a nonprofit where they have a board member who's a you know, really key cornerstone of, you know, in the community, or business leader in the community, that, you know, is a great person who's name to have on there. But just because their name is on there and they come to the meeting once every 6 months, you know, that's required of them, you know, what other direct involvement are they having? And so I think, you know, gauging the interest beforehand, even being, you know, just very upfront and candid with them about, you know, what your goals are and what your expectations are of a board, you know, should be a discussion that you have up front, especially if you're building out your board for the first time.
Perfect. Thank you.
The next question comes again from Shelley Lore, and she asks, if there is a year in review letter, should there be an envelope for giving in there if we're going to ask again in a few months?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Absolutely. There's no reason if there's especially if you're sending out something that's highlighting your successes, right? If you're doing a year in review and talking about all the great things your nonprofit has accomplished, there's certainly no reason not to say, you know, hey, and if you want to help us continue this great work next year, here's something that you can do to you know, to help us out. There's certainly no harm in that, as long as you're not, you know, following that up the very next day with another email and then another email 5 days later to fundraise. And you know, Shelley had that other question before about how often you should be soliciting people. I think there's a big difference too between your regular annual fundraising efforts and if you are doing a sustained campaign, especially if it's a crowdfunding campaign. So oftentimes if the duration of the fundraiser is shorter, so let's say you're running a 30-day campaign to raise $10,000, oftentimes you'll be able to get away with emailing somebody 3, 4, even 6 or 7 times during that 1-month period because it's a sustained campaign and it's not something they're going to be doing on a regular basis. And so again, I think that's on a case-by-case basis, but I think donors are a lot more tolerant to very regular emails if it's in relation to a certain campaign, and then a lot of times, if you're going to do like a countdown or a ticker or something like that, or maybe, but I see a lot of nonprofits that use like the thermometer, like we're X amount to our goal, help us get to X amount.
The next question comes from Charles Himes. I'm going to unmute Charles now.
Great. I'm loving all these questions, guys. I'll hang out for, I might not be the expert on some of these things, but certainly if you email me your questions, I'll maybe Ben and I could try to compile those questions later, and maybe we'll crowdsource some of the answers for you guys.
That sounds like a wonderful idea.
Hey, Charles.
Hi, Jason. Can you hear me?
Yeah, man. How's it going? Good,
thanks. I'm the president of a nonprofit citizen input project, and I had a couple questions. The first one was just a follow-up on these fundraising tools you had mentioned. Wondered if you had any examples.
So for the CommitChange fundraising tools?
Or you said there's a lot of great fundraising tools out there for nonprofits to use themselves for creating effective fundraisers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look, even if you're just looking at the screen right now, so CommitChange, Indiegogo, CrowdRise, Rally, Classy.org. I mean, these are all nonprofit fundraising platforms where you can, in a matter of, some of them in just a matter of minutes, be, creating a crowdfunding campaign for your organization. So, there are tools out there that you can implement on your own. I mean, even CommitChange, if you want to have, if you want to be able to accept donations really quickly and easily on your website, CommitChange even has an implementation concierge, so it takes literally 99% of the work out of implementing the tools. But of course, going back to implementing tools and having great tools is only a tiny piece of your fundraising efforts. It comes down to you guys to actually promote the organization and promote the fundraising. So while there are a lot of tools available, it's still going to come down. You won't find a tool that's going to run your campaign for you. You won't find a tool that's going to compose and and create stories around your nonprofit and particular goals for you. But in regards to tools, there are lots of things out there. Again, I'm biased with being a CMO of CommitChange, but there are lots of tools out there, and some of them are even like if you were to use Indiegogo, you are paying upwards of 7% per transaction, and that's not including a 4% payment fee. So you're literally giving up 10% of each transaction before you see any of that money that coming into your nonprofit. But it's a free tool to use, and you can set it up really easily. So, there are lots of fundraising tools out there that that you can use that don't require a professional fundraiser to set up.
I wondered if I could ask a second question.
Yeah, sure.
And this, we have kind of a unique nonprofit where we've developed the pain point that we're focusing on is that in the election process, most people don't have access to the nomination stage of elections. They can only vote on the candidates that eventually end up on the ballot.
Sure.
And because of this, the way this is structured, it's wealthy individuals and corporations that are able to place the candidates on ballots who basically represent their economic interests, which are different from the economic interests of the vast majority of people. So you end up with candidates, one of which is going to be selected, who basically is representing the economic interests of wealthier individuals and corporations. So we've developed a method of it's a technology nonprofit, a method of allowing everyday people to be involved in the nomination process using something like crowdsourcing with an app. But it's very difficult to explain to people what it is. It's not like, children are starving, feed the homeless, help the starving animals on the street. It's something it's not easy to grasp, Do you have any insights on how to approach marketing something like this, fundraising for something like that?
Well, I think again, it comes down to learning how to tell your nonprofit's story. So, the story of putting people into office that are the right people to be in office can certainly be just as compelling as the local SPCA chapter, right? You might not have little fluffy dogs to post photos of, but you certainly have information and data to support why this is important. I think the crucial thing for you guys is learning how to tell that story in a way that is compelling to the people that you're trying to reach. And certainly that job is made a bit easier sometimes if you do have little fluffy dogs to put in the photos that people can that just about anybody can relate to. But you might also, you might also be looking for a different type of constituent, a different type of supporter, and that that supporter might be a little bit more politically engaged or a different demographic, and coming up with a story that is relevant to them is difficult. It certainly is not an easy thing. There's all of the nonprofits we talked to today sound like really cool, recruiting volunteer pilots and neat museums and awesome technology nonprofits across the country. There's some nonprofits that are just not glamorous, and creating a story that's compelling and that people can relate to can be difficult. But that is, if there's one thing that is the most crucial piece of your fundraising effort, it's finding the voice of your nonprofit and using that voice to tell a compelling story about why you're relevant. Because that'll help you with grant fundraising, that'll help you with soliciting online donations, that'll help you with any crowdfunding campaigns and get supporters, volunteers. If you can find the voice of your nonprofit and use that voice to tell a compelling story, that really is going to be the core of all your different fundraising efforts, and not just fundraising, but building your actual nonprofit.
I'm not sure what you mean by finding the voice of your nonprofit, but I also don't want to take up.
No, sure. So what I mean by finding the voice of your nonprofit is finding out the way to communicate with the target audience in a way that is relevant and that they can relate to. So when you say tell your story. Well, for the SPCA, and again, I just use the SPCA example because easy for people to relate to here. Telling a story of why it's important to pay for the spaying and neutering of dogs is something that a lot of people can relate to, and so telling that story ends up being a little bit easier. But for you guys, you have a little bit more complicated of a story to tell, and so maybe it's breaking that down into little digestible snippets of information that you're sharing. Maybe it's coming up with just a quick little video to explain what you're trying to do. But when you're talking about how do you build awareness, how do you build engagement with your organization, finding the way to communicate with your supporters, and then using that means of communication to tell them a story that explains the mission of your nonprofit at the same time is what you really are trying to do. So, rather than just saying, we have this nonprofit and this is what it does, tell us why it exists, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So
instead of telling when you're telling your story, instead of telling what your story is, tell people why your story is relevant, right? Why what you're doing is important.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate your thoughts.
Here's because Grassroots has a similar problem. It's not the most emotionally appealing organization that you might think of, but when we're looking how to frame our organization, we might not be looking at other nonprofits because they don't have like a great fit, but it's looking laterally to other organizations who aren't in the same business field that we're in, or we might look at LLCs, we might look at B Corps, just to see what they're doing and try to innovate in the same way, or tell a story in a similar way to them. So, we might look at an organization, like a Facebook, a LinkedIn, somebody who is community driven. You might want to do the same, looking at organizations who are trying to move the needle in political thought as well. who might not necessarily be a nonprofit. You don't have to look at, there's obviously wonderful charities who've done great fundraising campaigns like CharityWater, but they might not be a perfect fit in terms of visualizing how you might frame that same story.
That's a nice
I would say as well, it might be a little bit easier to give some better advice if I could see your website and take a look at your brand. So let's maybe if you want to connect on another time, I'd be happy to just do a quick walkthrough of your brand strategy with you, and I'll be happy to do that for free and just kind of see if I can offer any additional advice.
That'd be fantastic. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, that way I can actually see your web. Maybe you could email me a link to your website. I can check it out.
How can I email that to you?
I just posted my email address is jason@commitchange.com. So feel free to shoot me an email address or add me as a pal on LinkedIn or Facebook. I think I posted some of those in the chat already. I'm not sure if everybody can see the chat.
Okay, great.
We have a few more questions. Again, if anybody has some other questions, feel free to submit some last ones into the questions box. But we'll stick with the people who are currently asking. Orly O'Byrne asks, can we use CommitChange from Canada? The sign-up does not permit anything but a state.
We're rolling out our international functionality, and at the same time we roll out our professionals version, which will be about 8 and about 3 more months. Our CommitChange, the company, is one of the faster growing nonprofit fundraising technologies in the country, and we're trying to take care of the U.S. and then in about 3 more months we'll have our international functionality where you can connect Canadian bank accounts and that sort of thing. But certainly just stay tuned and feel free to sign up for our newsletter if you're interested in checking us out.
And here's some questions for people who have left, but we certainly want to get to those.
Yeah, maybe we could just, instead of buzzing people in, let's, we'll probably have to wrap it up in a few minutes on this end. So if we want to just kind of buzz through these next couple, and if anybody else has additional questions, again, just feel free to shoot us an email or something, and we'll make sure we communicate with everybody.
We have moved on.
This is awesome, though. This is so cool. We have so many people hanging out this long. I appreciate all you guys hanging in.
Yeah, this has been one of the more filled out webinars that we've done, the office hours. So this is now onto the lightning round, Jason. I think a perfect question for it. You can do it quickly. Anna asks, what platform does CharityWater use for their Create a Campaign initiative?
I don't know. Let me look here. So let's see. If you'll just give me 1 second, I'll try to look it up. Which initiative are we talking about?
CharityWater's. And you create a campaign, so you can create to be a sponsor.
Okay. I'm not seeing where I can do that on the home page here. I might have to actually log in or something. Yeah, I'd have to log in. I wanna say classy.org. But I'm not. Oh yeah, here we go. Start your campaign. Let's see here. I'm not. This actually might even be done in-house.
Yeah.
This might actually be done with their own development team. Yeah, that's what I'm guessing. Either that or classy.org is my guess.
Oh, 2 follow-ups. Does CommitChange have a feature like that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can really easily create crowdfunding campaigns using CommitChange. You actually don't even need to be using our paid account in order to run a very basic campaign. Here's an example of a CommitChange campaign where this nonprofit actually raised almost $500,000 in less than 2 months to raise money for childhood cancer research. They had a video embedded. You can you can just select the amount that you want to donate and fill out the form, and really quickly and easily donate to a nonprofit. And you can create peer-to-peer campaigns as well via CommitChange. Yeah, I'd encourage everybody at the very least, go and create a free profile on CommitChange. I mean, that'll be my shameless plug for this call. Is you can go to commitchange.com, create a free profile, there's some very basic fundraising tools available, but I'd love to connect with anybody that'd like a little walkthrough at another time and see if CommitChange would make sense to implement for their web fundraising efforts. So there's my one shameless plug, Ben. I'll try to keep it to just one.
As many as you want. I'm fine with you.
We should also mention, Ben, for all of you that are actually viewing this webinar as grassroots members, there's actually a special discounted rate that you can get if you sign up for CommitChange through the grassroots.org website. You can actually get about half off on the monthly cost of CommitChange as a benefit of being a grassroots member. So if you are a grassroots member, there's a real value add that you get, and specifically discounts on certain tools that that grassroots has found to be best in breed. And certainly we're happy to offer that discount to all grassroots members. So make sure you either mention that or sign up via the grassroots website if you do sign up for CommitChange.
You just can't get half off on the free profiles.
That's correct.
So again, going rapid fire to finish off, how do you respond to individuals when the initial interest they express does not match the message you are currently interpreting? This is coming from Carol McKillen.
Oh, Carol, that's a tough one. So how do you communicate with a donor when they initially expressed a ton of interest, you communicated with them, and now they maybe don't have the same interest?
Yep.
I think a great way to test that would be if you're using something like Constant Contact or MailChimp for an email campaign, because I'm assuming that this would be through email, right? If you're talking to the donor, you can probably gauge interest a little bit better. But one thing you can do is run A/B testing with both Constant Contact and MailChimp, and I'm sure other email tools. I'm sure some of you are using other email tools, but you can run A/B testing where your emails have different calls to action, and based on those calls to action, they get a different follow-up series of emails. So if you're trying to gauge interest, you may have an email that has 2 or 3 separate calls to action, and based on what they click or don't click, they get lumped into a certain follow-up category. And so we do the same thing with the CommitChange marketing. When we send out an email and we have a certain group that we see opens the email, we have a certain group that doesn't open the email. We have a certain group that opens the email and clicks on something, and then we have a certain group that opens it and clicks on 5 things, right? Every one of those groups gets lumped into a different follow-up campaign based on the action that they took. Because if somebody doesn't even open the email that I sent, from a marketing perspective, they're probably much less engaged than somebody that opened an email and clicked through to the next thing. So, I guess that's really only from the email marketing perspective, but that would be a way that I would test and then follow up based on engagement and based on responses.
We have one more question left, Jason. But before we go to that last question, I'd just like to say that it's been a great webinar, and for this year we already have 11 more webinars planned each month with Jason and CommitChange. And this last one, the question is coming from Alessandra Madrid, and there will certainly be more hosts coming along, Alessandra and Chris Lopez from grassroots.org, as well as bringing in some other voices so you can get some outside perspectives. I'm sure as much as you'd love to hear us, you're excited about new people talking about fundraising in other areas that are core to nonprofit missions. So, be on the lookout. We're going to put that up into the toolbox. We'll also send out emails about 2 weeks in advance or so to when those webinars are doing. So, if you don't feel like you can commit, through the toolbox, you don't have to, or if you want to change your mind, you can certainly cancel or just not attend the webinar. There's always going to be enough spots for everybody. But this last question is from Alessandra. She asks, millennials are constantly bombarded with content on the web. Do you have any insight on what types of content or what's the best way to present your organization's story in a way that millennials will actually take the time to read it and get involved in? Alessandra does not have a mic.
Yeah, I think you know, when you're sending out email campaigns, when you're engaging your supporters via your website or an email campaign or a mailer. But I would say if you're targeting millennials, a mailer is probably not the best way to do that. I mean, I probably couldn't even tell you the last time that I wrote a paper check. But one thing to do is use popular culture references and use different marketing, like use relevant current affairs and like pop culture relevant stories to get your message across. So your millennial donor is not going to really respond so much to the same message that you've been sending for the last 10 years in a plain text email that simply talks about how you're for the last 20 years you've been supporting our organization. They're much less patient about hearing about the actual nonprofit because they're getting so much more noise from other organizations as well, and there's so many more not just nonprofits but different groups, different interests vying for their attention and for their dollar, and so they're getting well-crafted, well-put-together, well-thought-out marketing campaigns from dozens of different emails and communications a day. In order to make yours stand out, it has to be something that's relevant, and it has to be visually appealing, and it has to have an immediate, something that they can do to immediately engage and be involved. If it takes more than 3 minutes for them to read the post, or if it takes more than 3 minutes for them to participate in whatever the email is asking them to do, they're very unlikely to complete that action. And again, it goes back to when I use this donation form. If your call to action is a donate form and you're linking to this, there is no way that a millennial will fill this out, simply because it's asking for way too much information up front. And if you go through this process, this is only the first of like 4 or 5 different steps that you have to take that all look like this, unbranded, unvisually appealing, doesn't show the impact that I'm having. So really, you have to be, in order to effectively communicate with millennials, you've got to be on your marketing A game, because all of the other organizations that are vying for their attention, and lots of those are multiple nonprofits, are going to win.
I really appreciate your time, Jason, and everybody in here. We are going to have this webinar recorded, and it'll be out to people hopefully over this weekend at the earliest. But if you want to continue on the conversation, just tweet myself, tweet Jason, tweet the grassroots hashtag GR office hours, and we'll continue on this conversation over the next few days.
Awesome. Ben, thanks for having me, and guys, feel free to hit me up if you need anything else. I think I put up as much info as I could there about how to get in touch with me, but certainly would love to talk to any of you guys more about CommitChange or more about Grassroots. And be sure, if you don't end up signing up for CommitChange via Grassroots, that you let me know when you do sign up, so we can make sure that you get that discounted version as a benefit of being a Grassroots member. So thanks again, guys. Thanks, Ben. And I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing me talk, so I'll talk to you guys on the next webinar. I look forward to it.
Enjoy the weekend, everybody.
Bye-bye now.